Today we are covering my variant of Oracle Think Tank in Standard post Miyaji booster set.
Take a look at who I am now. I'm stronger than ever. And if you ever doubted me, you should've known better.
So this deck is kind of post Miyaji meets post vilest Deleter in the sense that I'm not only thinking about the cards we get to use after Miyaji, I'm also thinking about some of the matchups that we may be seeing post vilest Deleter. However, this deck is really well suited to compete in the post-Miyaji meta, so if you're gonna be going to Springfest with Oracle Think Tank, this may be a list you want to try out. So first of all, we have 4 Imperial Daughter. This is basically the best ride you can have. She gets a crit, she gets hella power, she gives you hand advantage, she gives you stack, she gives you so damn much. However, if you need a budget variant, you're maybe still new to Standard, you're just trying it out, you could run Hexagonal Magus instead. It comes out of a trial deck, you immediately have 4, so if budget is an issue, because Imperial Daughter is pretty expensive, that is an option. However, if you do have the money for an Imperial, absolutely go for Imperial, it's such a sick ride. Next up, we have 4 CEO Amaterasu. Now, some people may be thinking, hey, why don't you run Hexagonal instead, or Pentagonal, or just some other grade 3? The reason is, CEO Amaterasu is not a bad card to be stuck on, and when you're playing as Murakumo, which is still a great deck post Miyaji and only gets better post vilest, you really want to be able to get advantage even when you're stuck on this ride. So that's why when you're considering to play competitively and you're gonna play OTT, you're gonna run into some Murakumo, you really want to ride at CEO instead of a Hexa or something like that. Next up, we have 2 Victorious Deer. Now, you could definitely bump this up. I wouldn't be against running 3 CEO, 3 Deer. Overall, Victorious Deer is just your big ass finisher. Some people choose to run 1. I don't like the odds of seeing it then. 2 or 3 is much better, but you don't want to clog your deck with grade 3s either. It's just such an insane finisher, so you definitely want to be using it. And if your Imperial Daughter happens to charge a grade 3, it's live even sooner. Next up, for grade 2s, we are running 4 Rectangle Magus. This is a new card from the trial deck, an actual amazing card. She pluses you, she stacks. However, she has a counterblast cost, and just like many cards in this deck, counterblast is pretty rare. If you know, I will be using some counterblast next turn as well for certain cards we'll be covering, then you might want to not use the skill and just use her as a beat stick. Remember that she gets power when you check triggers. One trigger isn't just 10k power, it's 15k power, so she gets very big very quickly, especially because this deck stacks so much. Next up is 4 Promise Daughter. This card is still amazing against something like a Kagero or a Shadow Paladin. I know Kagero is kind of falling off since it hasn't had support in a while, but it's still relevant. However, some clans don't really care about her non-retire. Regardless, she's still a beat stick, she doesn't need to be boosted, so you don't have to call a grade 1 behind her to make her a useful rearguard. Then finally, we have our tech slot where we have 3 grade 2s. You could run various things, but I'm choosing Sotori Hime here. First of all, because she has an interaction with a grade 1 that we will be covering later, but also because she gets to stack the deck after you've already done your drive checks, meaning when you're going up against an Excel deck like Murakumo, like Great Nature, just all these Excel decks that have gotten pretty good support lately, checking a defensive trigger is huge. So the fact that she adds that to your deck is really powerful. That's why in this tech slot you could run other stuff, but I really like the Sotori Hime. Now, one thing you could run instead of Sotori Hime in this slot is Battle Sister Choquette. I don't know if I actually mispronounced that, but she essentially lets you stack a grade 3 after checking top 5 for a soul, and the only card in this deck that uses soul is Rectangle unless you use Imperial Daughter's boost. Stacking this grade 3 can be valuable because you can draw it off Rectangle, another grade 1 we have, and also off CEO Amaterasu, but on the flip side, you also lose the chance of a good trigger check in your drive check if you don't have any way to draw into it. So it's a good consistency boost, but it depends on the situation whether it's worth it or not. Overall, if you think, oh, I'm gonna see a lot of Excel decks, maybe tech that Sotori Hime instead. If you think you're gonna see more of a balanced playing field, maybe try the Choquette. Next up, for grade 1s, we have 4 Kuor Magus. This card checks the top 2 and then lets you stack it. This is amazing when you ride it first, especially when you're going first. You get to check the top, maybe you see a trigger, and that way you can have an immediate defensive trigger already, because you get to use Kuor Magus' stack before you draw off Lozenge. So let's say you're going first, you ride the Kuor, you check top 2, and hey, Normally, your defensive trigger would have been something like, I don't know, a random grade 2 that you actually wanted to draw. And underneath, there's a draw trigger. What you can now do is swap the grade 2 with the draw trigger, draw the grade 2, and the next turn when your opponent attacks, check that draw trigger. That's really, really insane. Also, together with Tetramagus, later on, you will be able to stack even more. So, I just kind of spoiled already. We are also running 3 Tetramagus. This card is so nuts. We already established how good Victorious Deer is in this deck. Victorious Deer is your win con. But what if you had a mini Victorious Deer many turns earlier? That is Tetramagus. Not only does she draw you a card, but she also stacks a crit on top of the deck. This is kind of Victorious Deer, but without a power gain. And since she draws you a card, she can also dig for valuable pieces, like maybe your next turn's grade 3, right? Or an extra grade 2. She just adds so much pressure to this deck before reaching Victorious Deer that the deck got so much scarier. Next up, we run 2 Wheel Crane. Wheel Crane makes your rear guard much stronger. And yes, you run many cards that draw in this deck, turning Wheel Crane online, but Sotori Hime also triggers Wheel Crane. So that's a pretty cool interaction so that you can add power to your cards in battle phase. However, even more importantly, we run 3 Gemini Elf. I already explained to you how this deck uses a lot of counterblast. We have the Rectangle Magus, we have the Imperial Daughter, Sotori Hime, CEO Amaterasu, Tetramagus, everything uses counterblast. And so having access to very, very free counter charge in the form of Gemini Elf is super, super important. That's why you could absolutely run 4. If you expect people to kind of try to damage deny you or something like that, running the 4 Gemini Elf may be worth it. Now, finally, we are running 8 crits, 4 draws, 4 heals, and 1 Lozenge Magus as a starter, of course, as every deck would. This is basically my current OTT deck list. It may change a bit here and there. As I said, I've told you I may go for the 3 Deer, maybe the 4 Gemini Elf, maybe we switch out to Sotori Hime if it's slightly too counterblast heavy to my or your liking. That's all up to you. But overall, this deck is super, super strong right now. Definitely a tier 1 contender in the post-Miyaji meta. I hope you found this interesting, and if you did, please subscribe to the Solemn Vanguard channel and click the bell button to stay up to date. Like the video if you liked the video, and let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I will see you soon. Ciao.